Part 40. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 391. Chapter 391. Don't you believe me? She won't sneak out on her own. She should be in her room, right? I'll go take a look, Liu Zhu said. Tang Yu nodded and watched Liu Zhu walk towards the bedroom before she sat on the sofa. After sitting down, Tang Yuki placed a cup of tea on the coffee table, with a note underneath, "Tea for his mother." Tang Yu instantly felt a warmth in her chest. She reached out to pick up the cup of tea and held it in her palms. It was warm, and her hands that had just washed the dishes were warm. Tang Yu took a gentle sip and it was still sweet. Tang Yu instantly felt a soreness in his nose. This was the first time Zhang Wanan made tea for her. He probably ran away after brewing it. And in the bedroom, Liu Zhu knocked on the door and found Zhang Wanan lying on his back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he was thinking. "Have you finished washing?" she asked. Liu Zhu nodded and said softly, "Yeah." "Why aren't you watching TV outside?" Liu Zhu walked over and lay down on the other side, reaching out to pull Zhang Wanan over. "I made tea for my mother, and I will go out after she finishes drinking it," Zhang Wanan said. Just as Tang Yu expected, she ran in embarrassedly after making tea. Liu Zhu raised his eyebrows, obviously not expecting this little girl to make tea for Tang Yu. "Then I'll wait with you, and we'll go out together after mom finishes drinking." Zhang Wanan nodded. But Zhang Wanan fell asleep before Tang Yu finished drinking. She slept soundly on Liu Zhu's arm, but even though Liu Zhu was suffering so much, his arm was numb and he didn't dare to move. Zhang Wanan slept until the sun went down in the afternoon, and Liu Zhu also slept all afternoon. Tang Yu saw that the two had slept all afternoon and did not dare to disturb them. He went to the balcony to water the flowers and cut them, and then sat on a lounge chair to bask in the sun. Perhaps because the sun was so warm on his body, Tang Yu fell asleep for the first time for more than an hour. This was simply a luxury for Tang Yu, who had not slept well for a long time. Liu Zhu had dinner at Tang Yu's house in the evening, and he even stayed there. Because the two of them were going out together on the weekends, and it was troublesome to go back and forth, so he simply stayed. Asterisk. There were many people in the store on this weekend, and children liked to sleep in, so Tang Yu made breakfast and left a note to go to the cake shop. After getting up, Zhang Wanan and Liu Zhu had breakfast, put on their shoes and went out. Today is the day to meet Zhang Baihui. I don't know if that guy will talk about recent events, or what the real purpose of his appointment with them is. Everything will have to wait to be known. Jiao Jiao and He Chiu have already set off and are waiting at the bus station. We will meet them there and go there together. They have never been to Jiang Baihui's mother's shop. Liu Zhu nodded and held Zhang Wanan's hand tightly as he crossed the road. "Let's just take the bus there in a while. It's still a long way to go before the bus arrives. If you want to take a taxi, you only need to walk along the small alley." Liu Zhu thought for a while and said. Zhang Wanan was not familiar with the route anyway, so he nodded in agreement without any objection. "Do you remember the road? You won't lose us, right?" Zhang Wanan asked a little uneasily. It has been so long, maybe Liu Zhu may not remember it clearly. Liu Zhu raised his eyebrows slightly. "Don't you believe me?" No, just asking," Zhang Wanan explained hurriedly. "Well, don't worry, I remember the road. If we go wrong, we'll have to come back and walk it all over again. We'll always go right," Liu Zhu said domineeringly with a wave of his hand. "Can really be believed?" Zhang Wanan was a little worried, but it turned out that Liu Zhu's memory was really good. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 392. Chapter 392. The authorities are confused and the bystanders are clear. They found He Chiu and Su Jiao at the station, and then Liu Zhu called a car. After the group got on the car, Liu Zhu reported the location and the driver started the car and started running wildly. The few people sitting in the car were not very silent. Because their views on Luzes who have changed since the last time Luzes who agreed to Jongwonen's coming. He is a very good person, but he is cold and indifferent to others, but he is really good to Jongwonen. Brother, can you tell me why you are so nice to this little girl Jongwonen? He Chayu couldn't help but gossip. Luzes who looked at him, then at Jongwonen, and found that Jongwonen was looking at him with expectant eyes, as eager to hear his answer as he Chayu. Luzes who pursed his lips and thought for a moment. Just when they thought Luzes who wasn't going to say that he wanted to ask another question, Luzes who spoke. Because I like her and feel sad that I can't let go, so I treat her well, or maybe there is no reason to be kind to someone, Luzes who answered seriously. Jongwonen's heart was beating wildly at that time, and the little deer seemed very excited. Sujiao was very excited when she heard the answer, even more excited than Jongwonen. She didn't know why, but she glanced at He Chayu inexplicably. When she saw that he just smiled lightly and didn't react, she wasn't very excited. A heart returns to its normal state. Is there no reason to be nice to someone? He Chayu asked again. Not everyone is like this. It depends on yourself, Luzes who said. In fact, he didn't know. Anyway, he seemed to be good to Jongwonen for no reason. Brother, I seem to be nice to a girl without any reason. Why is that? He Chayu suddenly asked with a blush. Before Luzes who could answer, Jongwonen burst out laughing. Seeing Jongwonen laughing, Luzes who also laughed, but he didn't laugh out loud. He Chayu, it's just you. You don't even know how to show mercy to women. You only know how to bully Jiao Jiao every day. Tell me which girl you treat well. Jongwonen laughed at him mercilessly. He Chayu looked at Jongwonen and said nothing. Sujiao Xiao, who was sitting at the far end, didn't know what was going on and stopped making trouble. She turned her head and looked out the window, as if the issue they were discussing had nothing to do with her and she didn't want to care. The atmosphere in the carriage suddenly became very strange, and Jongwonen's smile suddenly became stiff. Luzes who pulled her over and whispered a few words. Jongwonen suddenly understood something. In fact, she had understood those things for a long time, but she just suddenly laughed at him without thinking about it when she suddenly heard what He Chayu said. Fortunately, this weird atmosphere did not last long. After a few minutes, the car slowly stopped at the entrance of the small alley. Luzes who looked around and saw that it was the same as last time. He still remembered the way, and at least he wouldn't be embarrassed in front of Jongwonen. Luzes who and Jongwonen were walking in front, and the other two were walking behind. To be precise, the two people were not walking side by side, but one behind the other, with a distance of about 1 meter in between. Compared to the two people in front of them who were chirping and recalling what happened the last time they came, they seemed very silent. There was so much silence that Luzes who thought he had lost the two of them. Sujiao Jiao's shoelaces were untied behind her, and the two people in front didn't notice and continued walking, but He Chayu noticed it and stopped and waited. Sujiao Jiao, who had finished tying her shoes, looked up at him and met his eyes. She looked away after just one glance. Why don't you leave? I'm afraid that you, a wanderlust, will get lost and can't be found, then you will cry like a little cat, He Chayu said jokingly. Because of this conversation, the two of them started arguing again. It seemed like nothing happened, but something happened silently. As for what happened, the authorities are confused and the onlookers can't tell. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 393. Chapter 393. They have many secrets that she doesn't know. Luzes who led the group of people through the streets and alleys, and 10 minutes later they arrived on the road opposite the wonton shop. Probably because he was moved by the scene, Zhang Wanan suddenly stopped and refused to leave. Loses who lowered his head to look at her and asked, "What's wrong?" Zhang Wanan looked at him and said, "You were injured here last time because of me." As she said this, she unconsciously touched Loses who's injured arm last time. "The last time I was here, Zhang Wanan didn't take a good look when crossing the road, and was almost injured by the will-o'-the-wisp boy. Fortunately, Loses who blocked him, but he was injured, and the blood on his arm stained his snow-white shirt red." Zhang Wanan blamed himself for a long time at that time. "Thinking about it now, I suddenly realized that many of Loses whose injuries were due to his own fault. Are we incompatible with each other?" She suddenly blurted out a sentence. "How come?" Loses who was surprised. "Then why, oh, forget it, we are still in the same 8 characters." Zhang Wanan thought about it and said. Loses who knew what she was thinking about, so he patted her head and said, "It was all an accident, don't think about it." Zhang Wanan nodded and said no more. The group of people were standing on the curb, and across the road was a wonton shop. "Why does it look like there's no one there?" He Chiu said suddenly. Zhang Wanan and Loses who also discovered this problem. It was in sharp contrast to the last time they came. Loses who raised his hand and looked at his watch and said, "It's probably not lunchtime yet. Why does it look a little desolate? There are still some fallen leaves piled up at the door. A clean person like Enxia shouldn't be like this, right?" Zhang Wanan said. "It feels like, it's been a long time since we opened a store," Su Jiao said. Everyone looked at her and suddenly felt that what she said was right. "Let's go and take a look." "You can't guess anything just by guessing," Loses who said. A few people looked at each other and nodded. But just as they were about to walk away, the door of the wonton shop across the street opened. He Chiu had his hand ready to say hello, but he quickly realized and silently withdrew his hand. The person who walked out of the opened door was not one person, but 2 people. To be precise, one walked out and the other pushed out. The person who walked out was Zhang Baihui. He looked thinner, as if he could fall down if the wind blew. The person who was pushed out in a wheelchair was Zhang Baihui's mother. "Is that the mother-to-be from Jiangbei?" He Chiu was a little surprised. Yuran, who had met Zhang Baihui's mother, remained silent. Su Jiao and He Chiu were a little surprised, but more surprised than them were Zhang Wanan and Loses who. The most surprised people here are Zhang Wanan and Loses who, because the energetic woman they saw last time is now sitting lifelessly in a wheelchair, with an aura of decadence exuding around them. "The threshold that I could have entered and exited by myself now requires my son to push me out. How could that very beautiful woman with a nice name become like this?" Zhang Wanan was a little confused. She suddenly realized that the mother and son had many secrets that she didn't know about. Is this the reason why Zhang Baihui disappeared inexplicably for so long without going to school? Several people were silent for a long time without speaking. They just stood and watched quietly, watching Brigadier General Jiangbei push the person out, watching him place the person in a sunny place at the door, and watching him go in to get the small table to put tea. Watch him put the blanket on Xia Wanfan's knees. Watch him bustling in and out of the room several times. "Let's go there." He Chiu was the first to break the silence. After all, there was no use standing here all the time. But before a few people made any reaction, the people on the opposite side had already noticed that they were waving at them. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 394. Chapter 394, Official Farewell. Now they had to react. Except for Loses who, everyone else in the group waved in response to him, and then walked over there. As she passed by, Loses who held her hand tightly and whispered, "You have to look for cars when you cross the road." He is still afraid of what happened last time. Sometimes when he thinks about it, he wonders what would have happened if he didn't protect her in time that time, and whether he would regret it. But fortunately, he did the right thing. So I don't regret it. Speaking, the group of people had already arrived in front of the mother and son. "I'm here, I didn't go to pick you up," Zhang Baihui said with a smile, a modest smile. "It's okay, we are all brothers, pick up whatever you want," He Chiu was the first to respond. Even though He Chiu said this, Zhang Bazun still smiled modestly. "Baihui, bring your friends in," a weak voice reached the ears of several people. The owner of the voice is Xia Wanfan, who somehow became like this. A few people looked down and found that the woman had closed her eyes tiredly, and they were too embarrassed to say hello. Zhang Baihui thoughtfully covered Xia Wanfan's legs with a blanket, and then led the group into the small shop. It was already desolate enough from the outside, but to their surprise, it was even more desolate inside. The small shop that was originally full of dining tables is now empty, with only one dining table standing alone in the center of the room. Except for the dust on the counter, the rest of the place is spotless, and it seems that it has been cleaned up. "There's no place to sit, so why don't you sit down somewhere first?" Zhang Baihui said sheepishly, pointing to the small stool next to the dining table. A few people were not polite and walked over and sat down. At least this will not make Zhang Baihui feel too embarrassed. After sitting down, Zhang Baihui brought everyone a glass of water, and then he also sat down. "I didn't expect it last time I came to the store, business was booming, but now it has become like this." When he said this, he was talking to Zhang Wanan and Lu Zizhu, because they were the only two people who had been to his store. Zhang Wanan nodded. He really didn't expect it. He originally thought he would eat wontons today because they were really delicious, but looking at Xia Wanfan's appearance, he probably couldn't do it. Zhang Wanan couldn't help but look outside and saw only the lonely back of the wheelchair and Xia Wanfan's head. "I don't know what happened to the mother and son." Zhang Baihui shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly, and said, "However, this place no longer belongs to us. Inviting you here today can be regarded as a formal farewell. I am sorry that I disappeared without telling the reason." He was finally willing to talk about this topic. The three of them looked at him together, a little nervous, but Lu Zizhu was very calm. Zhang Baihui took a leisurely sip of water. Said, "You have also seen what my mother is like now. The reason why I did not go to school when school started was because of my mother. She had a car accident the day before school started." There was no mood swing when he spoke, and he seemed to be taking it lightly. Zhang Wanan suddenly felt his heart tightening, and he unconsciously tightened his hand on Lu Zizhu. A car accident occurred the day before school started. A person who had a good future and was looking forward to the new semester suddenly faced a nightmare, and then failed to go to the school of his choice. This must be such a blow to a person. Lu Zizhu felt it, and he put his other hand on Zhang Wanan's hand as a comfort. "From that day on, I started to be busy with my mother's affairs. No one took care of her. I had to stay with her every day, accompany her through the dangerous period, accompany her in large and small operations, accompany her in recovery, and take her out to bask in the sun. My life all revolves around her, because she is my mother. If I don't care about her, no one will care about her. Those old guys only know how to give her money and never care about her safety." End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 395. Chapter 395. Are you coming back? Zhang Baihui paused for a moment when he said this. Then he continued, "Maybe you will ask me if I regret it? My answer is no regrets. She is my mother, and I should fulfill my responsibility, no matter what she becomes. So, we are leaving tomorrow to get medical treatment. Mom's leg needs to be cured." Jiang Baihui ended here. His voice was neither loud nor quiet, but it reached the ears of the women outside. At this moment, Xia Wanfan had turned her back to everyone and was crying. She always felt that she had delayed Zhang Baihui. She was ashamed of him and didn't know what to do. Repay. Zhang Baihui didn't have to live such a hard life with her. He should have studied hard in school and passed the university entrance examination. So you're leaving, right? Su Jiao asked. Are you coming back? He Chiu also asked. At this moment, they did not continue to investigate why they did not say goodbye when he disappeared, but asked him if he would come back again. Zhang Baihui glanced at Zhang Wanan, and then said, I will come back, this is my home. He Chiu breathed a long sigh of relief and said, that's good. We'll still be brothers when we come back. If we don't come back, forget it. Zhang Baihui nodded, of course he will come back. There is a lot he wants to get in the city, and he has to come back to fight for it. Zhang Wanan, who had been silent for a long time, finally said two words, come on. Come on, auntie will get better, Su Jiao encouraged him. Zhang Baihui nodded, of course he would try his best to help Xia Wanfan take good care of his illness. Is this place sold? Zhang Wanan looked around the empty restaurant. Well, there are many places where money is needed. When I have money and cure my mother's disease, I will come back and buy it back, he vowed. Zhang Wanan nodded, quite ambitious. A few people chatted for a while to reminisce about old times, nothing touching at all, they were just joking. When it was almost lunchtime, Zhang Baihui stood up and pushed Xia Wanfan in from the outside, and said gently, you sit here for a while, I will cook to entertain my friends. Xia Wanfan nodded and called Zhang Baihui in time before he disappeared into the kitchen. Baihui, there are meat and eggs in the refrigerator, eat them. If you don't want to part with them, put more in them, we'll leave tomorrow, Xia Wanfan said. A few seconds later Zhang Baihui said the word good, and then he entered the kitchen. When Zhang Baihui entered the kitchen, the three people sitting at the dining table stared at each other for a while. Finally, they all left their stools and walked to Xia Wanfan. Auntie, long time no see, do you still remember me? Zhang Wanan ran over and squatted in front of Xia Wanfan. Xia Wanfan looked at her and nodded. Of course she remembered that she had helped to deal with Lu's injuries at that time. I didn't expect that your relationship is still so good after so long, Xia Wanfan sighed with a smile. This is the first time Zhang Wanan has seen her smile since he arrived. Auntie, would you like to see if our relationship is good? He Chiu hurriedly grabbed Su Jiao and walked to Xia Wanfan and said. He Chiu was the first to come forward after hearing the compliment. Why could others see that they had a good relationship at a glance? He wanted to see if they had a good relationship. Xia Wanfan looked at the two of them, and then she opened her mouth and said, you two are the typical ones who think that you are closer than you are far away. Huh, you can tell from the fact that we fight a lot, right? He Chiu looked shocked. That's right, they just fight each other when they meet, but on Saturdays and weekends at her home, she feels upset when she can't see him and no one quarrels with her. Baihui told me when he was fine. Are you Jiao and Chi Yu? Xia Wanfan said and looked at the two of them. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 396. Chapter 396 Breakup Dinner. The two of them did not expect that Zhang Baihui would tell Xia Wanfan about their affairs, and they felt flattered for a moment. Auntie, did Baihui tell you about us? He Chiu asked with a surprised look on his face. He felt that the two of them had nothing to say except being naughty and mischievous. Tell me, you two are so funny. Auntie has always wanted to meet you, and she finally got to meet you today. Xia Wanfan suddenly became talkative when facing the two people. Do you mean we are having a fight? Su Jiao asked. Xia Wanfan nodded. Su Jiao suddenly covered his face with his palms and shouted, oh! I am a very ladylike child, but I was just mad because of He Chiu. Auntie, don't think I am not good after hearing about me from Zhang Baihui. All right. Okay, why are you so bad? Auntie likes girls like you. The three of them were suddenly chatting, but they couldn't interrupt even if they wanted to. After all, there were two chatty people here, so it would be difficult to close the chat box once it was opened. So Zhang Wanan and Lu Zizhu, who were standing aside awkwardly, looked at each other. "Go and help in the kitchen," Zhang Wanan asked tentatively. Unexpectedly, Lu Zizhu agreed simply, took Zhang Wanan's hand and walked inside. The smell of oil in the kitchen was very strong. As soon as Zhang Wanan entered, she couldn't help but cough and almost shed tears. Zhang Baihui looked back and started chasing them away when he saw it was the two of them. "Why did you come in? The smell of oil smoke is strong here, get out quickly." "Let's help you," Lu Zizhu said while patting Zhang Wanan's back with one hand. Zhang Baihui glanced at Lu Zizhu quietly. They had had almost no communication since they met. This was the first time Lu Zizhu had spoken to him. "No need for help, go out and I will choke you," Zhang Baihui said. Zhang Wanan didn't care. Even though he was coughing badly, he had already walked over to pick up the vegetables that had not been cut and washed, and started cooking on his own. Lu Zizhu glanced at it and followed him, saying, "If there are more people, we can finish cooking earlier. You don't want us to come here and be hungry before we can eat, right?" Zhang Baihui nodded. He really didn't hope. So the small kitchen changed from one person to three people. Laughter could be heard from time to time outside, and Xia Wanfan's laughter was loud, probably because of those two guys. "My mother hasn't smiled so happily for a long time." "She was right to call you today." Zhang Baihui couldn't help but glance outside. Even though there was a curtain blocking his view, he was happy from the bottom of his heart. "I think it's best to wait until you come back with your aunt to recover and call us," Zhang Wanan said jokingly. Yes, with the sound of stab the food was put into the pot, Zhang Baihui's voice was drowned. The laughter outside was getting louder and louder. The three people cooking inside were sweating but did not feel tired. Soon, with the efforts of the three people, all the food was ready and served. Su Qiaoqiao and He Chiu pushed Xia Wanfan to the dining table very diligently, and then carefully served Xia Wanfan. "Looks like they are the masters." Xia Wanfan had a good impression of them originally, and she was made to laugh by them just now, so she couldn't say that she liked them. "This dinner is considered a break-up meal. Thank you all for coming. Last time I disappeared without saying goodbye. It must have worried everyone. I will keep in touch in the future and I will make an appointment with you as soon as possible after I come back." Zhang Baihui stood with a glass of red wine. "Get up and say." A few people felt heavy in their hearts after listening to what he said, but they couldn't be persuaded to let Xia Wanfan miss the treatment. Then I suppressed the heavy feeling and drank from the glass. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 397. Chapter 397 Forced by Life. After one glass of wine, no one drank any more. After all, they were all still young, and Xia Wanfan couldn't drink too much. Everyone began to eat the food on the table. "I didn't expect you, Jiang Baihui, to know how to cook, and it's so delicious." Su Qiaoqiao took a bite and began to praise him. Zhang Baihui laughed hee and scratched his head and said, "It's not bad, but today I mainly need the help of Anan and Senior Lu, otherwise it wouldn't be done so quickly." Su Qiaoqiao opened her mouth to say something else, but He Chiu on the side blocked her mouth with a sound. He pointed to a table of dishes and asked, "Which dish do you like?" Su Qiaoqiao looked at him and felt confused, but she still answered him and said, "I like them all." He Chiu nodded and said, "I'll study it another day." "What are you studying for?" Su Qiaoqiao asked. He Chiu suddenly fell silent. After a few seconds, he lowered his head unnaturally and said while stuffing vegetables, "Learn to cook. At least you won't starve to death when there is no one at home." "Don't you have a nanny at home?" Su Qiaoqiao asked again. "Why do you have so many questions? Eat your food." He Chiu blushed for some reason and said impatiently. Look at you for being stupid and asking casually, Su Jiao said in a bad tone. This guy was so mean to her and still so impatient. Look, he is tired of living. He Chiu just snorted and said nothing more. On the other hand, Lu Zizhu and Zhang Wanan, who had been looking at the two of them, smiled mysteriously. What are you laughing at? Su Jiao probably didn't even think about it, so he asked in a bad tone when he saw the two people laughing, and also glanced sideways at them. As a result, the two people who were smiling just now stopped laughing instantly, especially Lu Zizhu's face turned cold. Su Jiao was trembling after seeing it. Lu Zizhu's affability these days has actually made her lose her mind. She just saw Lu Zizhu's look and suddenly remembered that this man had a very cold side. Brother, I was wrong, please laugh, Su Jiao said humbly. This sentence made everyone laugh, and even Lu Zizhu couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. It seems that this face can no longer be cold in the future. After the meal, several people went to clear the table and wash the dishes, while Xia Wanfan sat at the door again. She didn't know if the person she was looking forward to would come. He said he would come when he was done. But the lunch has been finished, isn't he still coming? There was a little wind, and Xia Wanfan couldn't help but pull up the blanket on her legs and close her eyes. In the kitchen. Do you really don't need this place? Is Auntie willing to do it? Zhang Wanan asked after enduring it again and again. Everyone was washing the dishes, making the sound of porcelain being rubbed against each other. However, after hearing Zhang Wanan's question, the sound gradually became quieter and finally became silent. Zhang Baihui sighed and said, I'm reluctant to give up, but what can I do? We can't operate here anymore, and we have to pay extra rent if we keep renting. There's nothing we can do. Anyway, there will be opportunities in the future. I will bring my mother back when her legs are better. I will support her in whatever she wants to do, as long as she is healthy, Zhang Baihui added. Zhang Wanan nodded, what about you? Where are you going to study? Over there. Go and find a school over there. Actually, it doesn't matter whether you study or not, he said with a wry smile. They all knew it, so they became silent. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 398. Chapter 398 Remarriage. 5 people were washing the dishes very quickly in the small kitchen, and soon all the dishes were washed and placed neatly in the cupboard. As soon as I placed it, I heard a sound coming from outside. It was the sound of a car, followed by the sound of the car door closing, and then the sound of talking. This voice was all too familiar to Zhang Baihui. His face darkened instantly, he pushed a few people aside and walked out in front. They looked at me and I looked at you. They didn't know why, but they followed them out anyway. Zhang Baihui walked faster than them all and had already reached the door, but he did not step out. Looking from behind, he stood upright with clenched fists, as if he was restraining something. Several people saw the scene and stood behind him. Looking out from the door, I found that Xia Wanfan was no longer alone outside, but there was a high-end looking car and a man in a suit and ties. That man was standing in front of Xia Wanfan at the moment. He looked about the same age as Lu Lin. An idea came to Zhang Wanan's mind. Could this be Zhang Baihui's father? But aren't you already divorced? She thought about the man outside and spoke. Midnight wind, here I come. The man's voice blew into the ears of several people along with the wind. Zhang Wanan secretly glanced at Zhang Baihui. His eyes were scary, and his fists were clenched and trembling. Xia Wanfan nodded without showing any expression, but only she knew that she was very happy and a little excited at this moment. She tightly grasped the armrest of the wheelchair and looked at the man, waiting for him to speak. Her eyes were full of expectation. I put off all my work. I'll go with you to get treatment, okay? Let Xiao Hui study hard, okay, he spoke again. Before Xia Wanfan could speak, Zhang Baihui had already spoken. He stepped out of the door and walked between the two of them. A big stone stood in front of them, blocking their sight. Xiao Hui Xia Wanfan called softly. Zhang Baihui heard it but did not respond. Instead, he stared at the man in front of him. After a while he said, "I don't need your kindness, you can go." When he said this, the children were shocked. Xia Wanfan's eyes were full of helplessness, and the man was also a little sad. They would be really stupid if they still couldn't tell that this was Father Zhang who came to see their mother and son after hearing this. But didn't Zhang Baihui live with Father Zhang in the past? But why does the relationship feel so stiff? Xiao Hui, the man called. He was about to say something but was interrupted by Zhang Baihui. "Mr. Zhang, if you are busy, don't waste time here with us. I have to greet guests and I don't have time to entertain you. You should go back to your big company. The company's work is more important than our mother and son," he added. When Father Zhang heard what Zhang Baihui said, he looked at the children and bowed slightly, as if to say sorry. A few people laughed back in response. Xiao Hui Xia Wanfan called him. "Mom, we can still live without him." Zhang Baihui turned around and said to Xia Wanfan. "You have to study and go to school. You can't follow your mother all the time. It will delay you," Xia Wanfan said. "Studying is not the only way out. I can do other things, so you don't have to worry." Zhang Baihui was extremely stubborn. This man, on the other hand, only cares about the company. Our mother and son are nothing to him. Xiao Hui, Xia Wanfan didn't call his name softly this time, and she was a little angry. "I plan to remarry your father. Whether you want it or not, this is our business. I think clearly about it." Xia Wanfan was also very stubborn at this moment. Zhang Baihui was dumbfounded at that moment. He looked at Xia Wanfan and then at Father Zhang with a look of disbelief on his face. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 399. Chapter 399. You also want a complete home, right? Your father was not at fault in our previous divorce, and there were no problems in our relationship. It's just that I can't stand that he has been busy with work and has no time to take care of us. Your father has come to see me over the years, but I have always disagreed. I know that I owe you and your father. We have always had each other in our hearts over the years. We have talked about it. From now on, your father will put family first. Besides, you also want to have a complete family, right? Jiang Baihui was silent when Xia Wanfan asked the last sentence. If possible, who doesn't want a complete family? Xiao Hui, I want to talk to you. Father Zhang spoke from behind him. Zhang Baihui didn't say anything, and didn't even look at him. Xiao Hui, go and talk to Dad, Xia Wanfan said. Zhang Baihui was silent for a moment, then raised his legs and walked towards the house. Jiang's father knew that Zhang Baihui agreed, so he smiled and followed him. Zhang Baihui stopped when he passed by a few of them who were standing stupidly and said, "I'm sorry for letting you see such a scene." A few people shook their heads hastily. "You stay with my mother for me and talk to her. My mother likes you very much," Zhang Baihui said. "Okay," the four people answered in one word. Zhang Baihui nodded and walked in, closing the door. The two men sat opposite each other. Zhang Baihui stared at Father Zhang steadily. Father Zhang looked at him with soft eyes, which was in sharp contrast with his eyes. It was obvious that Zhang Baihui's eyes contained hatred. "If you have anything to say, please tell me quickly. I also want to greet my friends." Zhang Baihui opened his mouth to break the silence. He didn't really want to stay in here with him for a particularly long time. Father Zhang nodded and spoke, "Your mother and I are going to remarry and give you a family. Dad knows that I was too busy and ignored you in the past. Now I can change. I want to take care of your mother instead of putting the burden on you. Then what? Zhang Baihui looked up at him. I hope you can agree that you should study hard. Your friends are all good. If possible, you can stay here. This is the place where you grew up. You should have a lot of reluctance to leave, right, including this store, Father Zhang said as he looked around the store. I bought it after your mother recovers. She can continue to do the things she likes when we are older. I will accompany your mother to live such a comfortable life. I really love your mother. All my efforts over the years have been for her. I want to give her a good life. Are you done? Zhang Baihui looked at him. Dad Zhang was stunned and said, it's done. Are you sure you can treat your mother well? Can you always stay with her? Zhang Baihui asked. I'm sure that I've explained everything about the company. I will stay with your mother during her treatment. I will also explain it to your grandfather, so that your mother will be willing to return to her parents' home. Zhang Baihui squinted at him for a while, as if he wanted to see through a hole in him. After a while, he dropped 3 words, opened the door and walked out. It's up to you, he said. The moment Zhang Baihui walked out, he felt that the big stone that had been weighing on his heart was gone, and he let out a long sigh of relief. He can have a complete family again, a home with mom and dad. Dad Zhang looked at the back of Zhang Baihui walking out and smiled. There were a little wrinkles in the corners of his smiling eyes, and something came out of the corners of his smiling eyes. When Zhang Baihui opened the door and walked out, everyone looked at him, especially Xia Wanfen, who was very nervous. How was the conversation? Xia Wanfen turned her wheelchair and looked at Zhang Baihui. It's quite pleasant. The speaker was Father Zhang. He was standing at the door with a smile on his face. When he looked at Xia Wanfen, there was unconcealable love in his eyes. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 400. Chapter 400, Heartwarming Moments. Xia Wanfen knew that the matter was settled as soon as she saw his expression. She smiled without hiding it, with tears in her eyes just like Father Zhang. The two looked at each other and smiled like children. We should go, Luzes who whispered in Zhang Wanan's ear. It's outrageous for them to be standing here in this warm family moment. Zhang Wanan nodded. Baihui, let's go first. See you next time, Zhang Wanan said to Zhang Baihui. Zhang Baihui looked at them and saw that they didn't want to stay. He nodded and said, I'm sorry. I'll treat you well next time I see you. Before a few people could react, they heard Jiang's father's voice say, no need to worry about it later. I'm very happy that Xia Huai has friends like you. I can see that he is also very happy. He will be able to go back to school soon. For a moment, all 3 of them except Luzes who widened their eyes in surprise. Which school? Our school, He Chiu asked. Are we in the same class? Su Jiao also asked. Before Father Zhang could answer, he heard Zhang Baihui say in a very aggressive tone, you said you want me to go back. Have you asked me for my opinion? Everyone was embarrassed for a while. Xia Huai, talk to Daddy, Xia Wanfen advised. Daddy Zhang shook his head at Xia Wanfen, indicating that nothing was wrong. He walked to Zhang Baihui and tried to stop Zhang Baihui's shoulder, but Zhang Baihui saw it and obviously took a step to the side to avoid him, so Jiang's father dropped his hand in embarrassment. Don't you want to go back to school? Father Zhang asked. Zhang Baihui didn't speak, but he didn't want to, just like he was very willing for his parents to remarry, but he was embarrassed to say it because he didn't know how to face it. Dad knows that you really want to study. You can't delay yourself. Mom is here with me. You can rest assured that I can take good care of her. The place we are going to is not far away. You can study hard here. At the end of Saturday Mom and Dad will come back to see you, okay? If it doesn't work, just follow us and study over there, and then come back when Mom's leg is healed. Dad Zhang is very thoughtful. Are you sure you can take good care of your mother? You will no longer be busy with work and neglect your mother, Zhang Baihui asked. Sure, very sure, Dad, Zhang said eagerly. Jiang Baihui looked at Xia Wanfan and saw Xia Wanfan looking at him. Dad can take good care of me. Before you were around, my father took care of me personally when my mother was sick, Xia Wanfan explained for Jiang's father. In fact, it was a pity to say that they had always had a good relationship and basically never had any quarrels together. However, she couldn't stand that her father Zhang was too busy and ignored her, so she decided to separate for a while, which lasted for several years. Zhang Baihui clenched his fist and nodded, then take good care of Mom. I go to school here and it's very troublesome to go around. I don't like troublesome things. When Father Zhang heard that he had thought clearly, he nodded quickly. If I knew you were bullying your mother again, I wouldn't be able to forgive you. I've grown up, Zhang Baihui said firmly. Xia Wanfan felt a sore nose, but also found it funny. Daddy Zhang nodded. Their family can finally be together. After learning that Zhang Baihui could continue to study here, several people were ecstatic. He Chiu was even excited to hug Zhang Baihui, but he restrained himself when he considered that the adults were there. Since I'm not leaving, then. He Chiu gave him a look. Zhang Baihui understood that it was just a treat. He smiled and nodded as he agreed. They are really leaving now, because this is a tender moment, and they are really an eyesore here. End of this chapter.